I'm sure we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It is 1:30 in the afternoon, Thursday, September 29th, 2022. This is a workshop meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners regarding the Lincoln County Commons. I want to note for the record that we do not have a public comment opportunity built into this meeting. However, as always, we welcome public comment on this or any subject through our Smart Sheet sign up online or in person or via Zoom at our regular weekly meetings. And first off, I will turn things over to County Administrator Tim Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you very much for allowing this workshop today. We're here. There's several reasons for this workshop. First, in reviewing the budget that you approved this year, there are significant dollars that you have approved, not just through this last fiscal year, but carry over through previous fiscal years that have led to a substantial amount of monies in the millions for the allocation for the improvements that you're calling for in the master plan development for the project. And as such, you'll hear presentations today of how to use that in future revenue stream to be able to achieve your approved master plan. And additionally, that county revenue position is improving and continues to improve on an annual basis, as identified by our county treasurer, our department finance director. And it's all about community, and the opportunity presents itself to illustrate that fact now that we've got COVID headed backwards in our rearview mirror. The opportunity presents itself to move forward. You're going to hear a variety of different insights today, some that you're probably familiar with and will be reinforced for what you know, but you may also pick up a variety of different new insights from people that we have invited here today to make presentations before you. You'll hear information, again, that you were intimately involved with on the history, planning, but subsequent updated information on finance. You'll get an overview of the state of county affairs by the executive director of the Oregon State Fairs. You will also hear a variety of items for us to consider as you move forward, as specifically related to fairground operations. And I don't mean fair operations now, I mean fairground or commons operations. I want to make that very clear from the folks at the Oakview Group. And then we're going to talk about 4-H activities and something near and dear to your heart that you approved with a great appreciation, and that is the work that will be going on in the 4-H barn renovation. And then we'll talk about next steps and the opportunities that will present itself. Before I turn this over, I want to take a moment just to preface from my remarks before we get too far down the road. I want to thank those folks who've made today's presentation on this workshop available to all of us. I'd like to thank Wayne Belmont, formerly county council, and someone who you worked with very closely on this project over the last several years. Patrick Singh with the Oregon State Fair Association, Peter Zingoni and Brian Hoffman with the Oakview Group. I'm not sure where Peter's calling in from, but Brian is online and he's calling in from Seattle. Todd Williver, who you know, our former fair director. Todd, I believe, is somewhere in Alaska, as we can see him on screen. Todd, great to have you here today. Heather Tower is with us from the OSU Extension. And then also great thanks and appreciation to the folks at Business Oregon, Emily Cook and Becky Baxter, who helped us with the grant for the 4-H barn, calling them out, thanking them. With that, we'll get started here with Mr. Belmont in an overview of the history, the Commons Master Plan process, and some of the financing that can give you an idea of the opportunities presented. So, Wade?
Thank you, commissioners. It's great to be here. It's been a little while since I've sat in front of you and done a presentation, formal presentation. And in fact, for the last couple of years of my tenure here, we did most everything by Zoom. So being in the same room with you is quite a pleasure. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. You are fairly familiar with this, but so I'll try to be pretty brief going through. But I do want to focus in on what has been a very, very open and public process that has gone into development of the master plan, and then supported through a number of key actions that the board directed to go to the voters to see if the vision of what the county wanted to do for redevelopment of this property would be supported by the voters to provide the necessary financing to accomplish that. So I'll run you through that process. First thing I'd like to do is talk about in 2016, the Fair Board actually adopted and recommended, and the Board of Commissioners adopted a change in the name of the facility out there from the Lincoln County Fairgrounds to the Lincoln County Commons, home of the Lincoln County Fair. I think that was really a reflection of the multiple use vision for this particular property, that the fair is a key component, a key tenant of the property, but that there's more to the fair and more to the facilities out there than just the fair. That vision statement that was adopted by the county fair recognized it as an important gathering place for Lincoln County. Again, the key mission from the Commons vision statement was to offer a variety of venues, not just one venue, that will make it a preferred destination for residents. And the core values were to respect traditions of the past and cast new directions for the future with a focus on youth. And that was the intent of the redevelopment, and that was the goal of the Fair Board and the Board of Commissioners in 2016 when that was adopted. So in 2018 and 19, we built upon work that had been done. Really, there was originally a master plan developed in 2009. Then there was a blue ribbon committee that the Board of Commissioners appointed to look at what was desired in the community for redevelopment there. And then in 2018 and 19, we undertook a master planning process. That process was very public. It had a visioning committee appointed by the Board of Commissioners that included representation from a number of stakeholders, also representation from the city of Newport, since the facility itself is located here. And we were looking at partnering opportunities with various groups. The consultants in that particular process held a number of public meetings. We had open houses in Toledo, Walport, and Yachats. And the consultants conducted extensive public and stakeholder outreach in the development of the plan. The plan was adopted by the Board of Commissioners and the Fair Board on February 22nd, 2019, in a joint meeting of the two bodies. There's extensive documentation about that planning process and what went into the planning process online if you go to the County Commons website, which is within the Lincoln County website. The key features that came out of that process and the things that we wanted to look at were the development of a new exhibition hall, a multi-purpose facility, a pavilion, a rodeo arena, improvements to the livestock barn, a formal entryway that would welcome people to the grounds, enhancing the floral building, which is a current asset, very extensive landscaping and development of multi-use spaces, and then, of course, covering parking and restrooms and other needed facilities. I think that multiple use aspect of this, it cannot be underscored. As I indicated, this was adopted in 2019, but now we're in 2022. What happened in between? Part of it was that we had two major incidents in Lincoln County, that being the Echo Mountain Complex wildfire, then followed and actually concurrent with COVID. These particular facilities, and in the state they are right now, were key strategic resources in both the response and the recovery to those two particular incidents. That's something that we had actually recognized and we're thinking about in the planning process, the master planning process. But it really was reflected in the actions we took during that time frame there. And you know very well what we did and how we utilized those particular grounds. to respond to both the fire and COVID, and then again in the recovery process. And that continues to be a key component in what we're looking at in redevelopment of the property. I'm going to talk about another entity at the end of my presentation. That's actually, it's very interesting to see that just recently they approved a process that's very, very similar to what we're doing here. So based on the master planning process, we needed to see how the voters would respond to providing necessary funding for that. So thank you, Casey. You've moved forward to the two ballot measures that were presented by the Board of Commissioners to the voters to basically fund both the capital improvements. And then a key feature in the second ballot measure was also to provide funding for operations. Not something that's done with a lot of jurisdictions as they plan out new facilities, but we and the board had the foresight to think about, we need to cover operational costs as well as improvement costs. So in 2007, the voters approved by a margin of 60% yes, an increase in the Transient Lodging Tax of 3%. And a portion of that money, 40% of that 3% increase, was dedicated to a Fair Facilities Improvement Fund. And we've been collecting money for that purpose since that time. Then in 2016, we submitted another measure to the voters, which again was approved by 60% of the voters in Lincoln County. That authorized an increase in the transient lodging tax of an additional 1%. But that entire amount to fund increased support for redevelopment of the fairgrounds, the commons, and to also operate facilities at that location. And again, a key component was the operations. Others have come along and provided additional possible support for this particular project, and also recognition of the need to do the redevelopment. I've identified a couple of things within the city of Newport itself that were actually developed either concurrently with when we were doing our master planning process or shortly thereafter. The first is the city of Newport's North Side Urban Renewal Plan. And as you recall, the Board of Commissioners ended up supporting that particular project when it was developed. That has, and I've provided actually a picture of the page of the North Side Urban Renewal District from the city of Newport website, which includes their referencing of this particular project, as well as possible project details in terms of the amount of money that might be available. So I have regularly, since that time, I had regularly met with the Urban Renewal Agency to keep them up to date and have discussions on what money might be used for to assist in this particular project. The last discussions we had, and again, some of this predates COVID now at this point, but we talked about support for common infrastructure. That is things like sewer, water, fiber, storm drainage, things that could be, some of that could be on site if it serves the entire area. Some of it might be off site that would serve that entire area, not just the commons grounds, but areas around there, which the city is also seeking to redevelop. Also recognition that there needs to be roads improvements in there, especially Harney, 7th Street, and that intersection of Harney and Highway 20. And there's also the possibility of doing some other offsite projects that benefit this particular area as well as the commons itself. So those are all on the table and something that we can continue having those discussions with the city of Newport. City of Newport also included references to the commons redevelopment in the City of Newport Master Parks Plan, which was recently adopted. There they talked about coordination, especially of the utilization of multiple use of this particular space. Anything that's left in open space, how would that fit in and how could that be utilized in the city's master plan? And so they want to continue discussions and partnerships with us in that particular area. A key component of the master plan is also providing safe pedestrian bike access to all the parks facilities and including this particular redeveloped site here. And so they're looking at ways they can connect pedestrian trail and bike systems in the city to what we do for redevelopment. I've also included a portion of the master plan for that. Finally, the city of Newport recently adopted a transportation system plan. And they included references to our redevelopment project in that particular plan. They noted the need for pedestrian improvements at the Newport High School, at the Commons or Fairgrounds, Harney Street and surrounding areas. And again, there's a key focus in that particular plan on needed improvements to Highway 20 and Harney Street to reflect the expected redevelopment of this entire area, not just our property, but everywhere around. So those are some other recognitions of the master plan that we've developed and also potential partnerships that we can explore. The last part that I'll present, and then I'll take any questions, is to look at those two ballot measures. We've got a slide that shows the revenue that we have actually received over the last number of years for the Fair Commons Facilities Fund. And as you can see, while it was steady for several years, didn't really deviate too much up or down. In 2017, which was the first full year of both ballot measures being in place, and we started to see a substantial increase. I think that's not just reflective of the new ballot measure and the additional funding, but that's also reflective of really what we saw, the phenomenon of COVID. I know I had conversations with counterparts in Lincoln City and Newport, city managers there. We were all three working on developing forecasts for what would happen during COVID. And as you recall, and I know the commissioners recall this very, very well, we also put a moratorium in for a period of time. We were all predicting and prognosticating that there would be a substantial decrease in the revenues that we would get from transient room taxes during that year. All three entities projected that in their budgets. That was not the case. While we did see a dip, and you can see that sort of reflected in the 2020, it was not near the dip that we had projected. And actually we came out in a better state there. And as you can see, 2021 and what's projected for budget forecast for 2022 shows actually significant increases in the amount of revenues that we are receiving. I think this is important, number one, because as you look at the master plan, if you go through the economic development or economic forecasting portion of that, we were very conservative in our estimates of what revenues would be available for redevelopment. This exceeds those forecasts. Although we did say there's a good chance that the revenues would increase, we did not project this kind of increase. So that's very important, I think, a key feature of what you'll need to discuss as you go forward in your next steps. So that's something to look at very carefully. Also have Casey, thank you, showing a graph that shows graphically how we increase those particular revenues. I want to end by talking about something that I learned just very recently about another entity that's following the same footsteps we are doing, and that is Lane County. Actually, on Tuesday of this week, Lane County approved increases to both their transient room tax, and they have a rental vehicle tax. And they have obviously with their airport and various other things come in. There's a lot of cars, and with the events they have at the University of Oregon and other places, they have a lot of rental cars that are utilized there. And as entities that have a number of those particular services do, they have a tax on them. They are increasing that tax. They're dedicating both increases to redevelopment and expansion of their former fairgrounds, which is now called the Lane Event Center. What they're contemplating building is multi-use facilities. They are looking at a possible relationship with Eugene Emerald's baseball team, so that one of the facilities that would be improved would be a ball field kind of thing, but it would be something that would be utilized not just for the Eugene Emeralds, be utilized for other kinds of purposes. And they really stress the need for having multiple use facilities, and that was a key component in their decision to move forward with this. And they also, I thought it was very interesting, the comments that were reported by the Board of Commissioners, were repeated by several of the Board of Commissioners, where they also looked at this facility to be developed up to emergency standards as a location for emergency situations that they could respond to incidents like we did. They had the same issues in Lane County. They had a fire at the same time we had our fires, and they also had to do a response and recovery to COVID. So it was very interesting to see that they've come to the same conclusion that these facilities are strategic resources and assets for the community. They need to be upgraded and they need to be utilized. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Mr. Belmont, thank you. I want to go back to the yearly revenues in the Fair Commons Facilities Fund. The year-by-year numbers are certainly interesting. Do we have, or maybe Mr. Johnson has, the total balance in that fund as of right now?
We're at what, 5.2?
I want to say $5.3 million.
Yeah. So we have been carrying that forward. And may I also add that the treasurer and I met, and the forecast for the TRT for years to come is significant. In fact, the numbers should run in the 7-digit category. So expectations for 23, 24 look very bright, as well as 24, 25, 25, 26.
Okay, I want to follow up on that, but then looking back at that 5.3 million, I know we've spent some of this revenue on repairs, I think needed sewer work and electrical work, and I think we purchased several sets of new bleachers, portable bleachers, but basically the fund is pretty much been growing and accumulating over this decade, correct?
And that is correct.
Okay. Well, that's what I've got for right now. Do either of my fellow commissioners have questions on this part?
I do. I had the same question you had, so thanks for answering that. The other question I have is, I think it was slide 11, Fair Commons Facility Annual Revenue. It's the graph. I guess my question on that one is that just a different way of showing the data from slide 10, or is that looking at revenue from rentals? You didn't really talk
No,
about that
this is
one.
only that's coming from the room tax. This does not
Okay.
include anything from the rentals.
I was gonna say, I don't think we had that many rentals in 2022, so I'm just checking that.
No.
That's all the questions I have right now.
Okay,
Thanks.
I've got another one. The forecast you're telling us for continued growth in the TRT is robust. So it's not going to be impacted, in your view, by the current moratorium on new TRT licenses and, you know, some of the steps we're contemplating to put permanent caps in place. And we've already seen over the last couple of years, what is it, 89 licenses lost through various means of attrition. And, you know, there could very well, that trend could continue, but despite all that, the confidence is high in continued growth.
Well, you have to look at a forecast, which is an assumption. If we did just simply a back of the napkin trend line, we'd look at it and say, we could take a straight line and be very serious with you. If you decided that the board wanted to approve a bond based upon your TRT, and you looked at a stagnant number from here on out over 30 years, just do the quick math and you're looking at $21 million. And that's substantial. Then you add the 5.3 million that you have in the current carryover, which has been growing simply because we haven't been spending the money. You're now looking at around $26 to $27 million in total. When you start to look at the construction costs that were identified for it, we come right up to what should be around $30 million. We'll talk about that in next steps at length, but kind of getting out in front of ourselves. But what is important is that we have capitalization, formulation of capital in our budget that has been set aside by your leadership. It needs to be leveraged and moved forward to achieve the master plan that you've identified.
And to further clarify, when you talk about bonding, you're not talking about going to the voters to approve a new bond issue, but rather you're talking about essentially borrowing against the future TRT proceed.
That's
proceeds,
correct. So it's already been approved by the voter. You're
Mhm.
simply using a revenue that has already been approved by the voter to achieve this end result. Revenue bond.
Okay, further questions?
Well, I'll just follow up on that. I mean, basically what would happen if that's the way we decide to go is you take a revenue stream and you bond that revenue stream as the payment, a debt payment against those bonds into the future. So it's a common way to finance capital projects. I'm going to maybe back up a little bit. I think it's important for people that may be new to the process or people like me that have been a part of this process in various forms for quite a while to highlight again and maybe provide a little more detail as to all of the efforts to provide public input and public testimony. I remember sitting in the back of this room as a banker, and two of the three people that were sitting up here are no longer a part of this process. So I think it would be important to highlight some of the specific opportunities for public input that have already occurred and are, of course, a part of this process that we continue to move forward as we continue to move forward. So
Definitely.
I guess I look at Counselor Belmont because he was the one that has been here the longest, but I'll
Well,
be
if I
happy
might,
to entertain comments from either of you.
I'm deferring a little bit here, but just in terms of there is extensive documentation on the County Commons website. I don't know, Casey, if you could bring that up even. That talks about the master planning process and includes a whole public engagement description in there that talks about all the meetings that were held, all the people who were contacted. You can see it's the fourth one down on the public involvement plan there for the Commons Master Plan. You know, and again, we held a number of open houses. We did a variety of different things there. So the last two items on the list that Casey's looking at there, and again, this is on the Commons website underneath Lincoln County. If you just Google Lincoln County and then go to County Commons, you can find this. The appendix actually talks about the very specific recommendations and ideas that people had for various things during that process. So there is a great deal of information that's there that describes in very intimate detail what was done for public involvement in that particular process.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remind people that there was a separate earlier master planning process, as well as the Blue Ribbon Committee's public process, plus two elections in which 60% of the voters or more authorized these lodging tax increases dedicated to redevelopment and operations of the fair. So at least as far as I'm concerned, the voters have spoken on this. The public has spoken numerous times.
Yeah, my comment or request for information was not meant to think that I believe there hasn't been sufficient public input. It was, in fact, the opportunity to emphasize the fact that there has been a tremendous amount of public input. And I guess, again, it would be highlighted by the 6 times that the visioning committee met, 3 open houses, and the public testimony that the consultants took. So, you know, and that's just one part of the process that we started, the county started many years ago. So again, my point was a lot of public testimony has been taken and is incorporated in the master plan as we move forward.
I'm in total agreement, Commissioner Hunt. I think, you know, the concern that I have, but, you know, you're never going to win over or satisfy everybody, that despite this record of public process going back 15 years, there's still a minority of folks who have been vocal, who don't think this is the right course for this property, that and still would like to see it go in another direction. That you know, that as far as I'm concerned, that door closed a long time ago.
Well, we adopted the master plan.
Right, once we did that.
2019. So
Commissioner Jacobson, anything?
I'm ready to move forward.
Okay,
In more than one way.
yep, let's.
Okay. We go on to our next presentation. Joining us next will be Patrick Singh. Patrick is the Executive Director of the Oregon Fair Association. We're honored and privileged to have him with us today. I believe he's joining us from virtually in the Portland or metropolitan area or someplace in the Valley. His presentation today will be on the state of county fairs as it pertains to Oregon.
Thank you.
Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Chair Hall and Commissioners Jacobson and Hunt. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, Patrick.
I was pleased to see the title of former in front of Wayne Belmont's name. So congratulations, whatever that means. That
We kept
retirement
threatening not to let him leave, but anyway.
see, retirement is still keeping you busy. So yes, as Mr. Johnson mentioned, my name is Patrick Singh. I work as a lobbyist for a contract lobby firm called Public Affairs Council based here in Salem. As part of those duties, I serve as the Executive Director of the Fairs Association and have been in that role for about 2.5 years now. Of course, prior to that, I worked with all of you at AOC, Association of Oregon Counties, primarily on public safety and communications issues. So it's good to see you all. And then 2 years before that, where Newport and Lincoln County have a close part in my heart, is I spent 2 years working at Business Oregon on port issues during the very exciting time that the NOAA fleet was landed. And then the previous 5 years working for your fellow former commissioner, Jean Cowan, who was in the legislature when I worked for her. So I think it's great that you all are taking a look at your fairgrounds and the commons and what that could be for the community and your county. I think many fairs are doing the same across the state as a way to kind of reinvigorate what fairs and fairgrounds do for the community. I think oftentimes we think of fairs as just a 3 or 5 day, sometimes 10-day party that exists once a year. And I think if anything, the last 2 years have proven that they are exactly the opposite. So I'm here to talk a little bit about state of county fairs. I know there's some statistics. Thank you to Casey, Mr. Johnson, for pulling some of this together with me. But fairs and county fairs, there's a lot of them in the U.S. And the number that I think shocks me is the total economic benefit of fairs pre-pandemic, $4.7 billion. So fairgrounds, as you know, especially in Oregon, are very diverse. We all have heard, I think, in our time at AOC that if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. That translates to fairs as well too. So some fairs, all they do is the fair, for the 3 to 5 days a year. Some fairgrounds hold events every single week. Some own RV parks that they manage. Some own other event type facilities, or as was mentioned in the previous deal, looking to expand into a baseball stadium. So fairgrounds have kind of become both a social and economic hub for counties. In the next slide talks about a little bit more of Oregon specifics. So we have 36 county fairs in the state. So every county has a fair, but only 33 counties actually own fairgrounds. So the 3 that don't, Marion County uses the state fairgrounds. Multnomah County uses Oaks Park, which is a private amusement park. So there's a unique partnership there. And then the Umatilla County Fair, the fairgrounds is owned by the city of Hermiston. And of course, we have the state fair, which is in Salem, operates a 10-day fair each year, and then also hosts a number of events throughout the year there. There are different organizational structures and operating structures that fairs have, ranging from county departments with county heads that either answer directly to the Board of Commissioners or to the Fair Board that's appointed by the commissioners. Some fairs and fairgrounds are run by nonprofits. Some are kind of quasi-public entities like ORS 190 type organizations like AOC. And as you know, in Lincoln County, a couple fairs are contracted with outside entities like OSU Extension or other groups. All are either overseen or kind of advised by a fair board, which is appointed by county commissioners. The next slide, just some economic benefits of fairs. Some data that we collected from OFA. It's been a while since we've done a real economic study, and that's something we've been trying to ask the legislature to help fund. So in 2009, OSU did a study and on the contribution of local economies by fairs and fairgrounds. And then we also collect an annual report after each fair season. We're in the process of doing that now for 2022 on fairs and how they utilize their fairgrounds. So in 2019, our last report prior to COVID, fairgrounds hosted 6.15 million people during their fairs and over 17,000 local events. And that trickles down to businesses that go to local hotels, restaurants, retail establishments, service providers, all the folks from your porta potty rental folks, sound and light, entertainers, magicians, reptile folks, and all the folks that we have come to see and love at our local county fairs. Over 600 nonprofit groups use fairgrounds, which generated over $10 million in charitable donations. And the volunteer effort at fairs and fairgrounds is very substantial. 10,000 volunteers dedicated about 200,000 hours of volunteer service at their local fairgrounds. Fairgrounds through either year-round or seasonal employ about a little less than 500 folks with the payroll of about $10 million. So that Oregon State study that's mentioned estimated that fairgrounds generate an economic footprint of about $52 million in output, $28 million in value-added income, and about 1,000 full and part-time jobs that range from all the service providers to folks in the county. The next slide talks about what else fairs do. It's not, again, just a party. There's huge economic benefit, but in addition to that, education to our youth and to the community with 4-H and FFA and all of those activities. The connection to agriculture and our local producers is huge, helping to bring folks together to educate the public, and community gathering places. So our fairgrounds host all these types of events, all the way to quinceañeras, to birthday parties, to rodeos and concerts year round. The next slide is on the pandemic. So the numbers I just rattled off are 2019 numbers. Those all went to about zero during COVID. So we weren't able to hold fairs. I think in 2020, maybe one county got away with holding an in-person fair. Some tried to do virtual fairs. But the impact on all the folks that rely on either providing entertainment or food or whatnot at county fairs went down to zero. And so fairs were in a very tough position because of their unique structure. So the Next slide talks about some federal support. You all know that counties received money from the federal government directly to counties. Some counties distributed some of that money to Fairgrounds if they were county departments. In counties where the fair is not quite a county department, saw little to no help from their counties. And it was tough because then they also couldn't apply for some of these grants that the state and federal government were doing. So things like the PPP loans and other COVID protections that the federal government was running. The Cultural Trust here in Oregon had a grant program that we thought fairs would be eligible for, but many did not qualify, although some did get a little bit of funding. So making up for those lost gate receipts and other revenue was very tough. In addition to that, the state, which currently provides each county fair approximately $55,000 per year in state funding for fairs and fairgrounds, because of the decreased revenue at the state, they were looking to cut that as well too. Fortunately, you all joined with us and other partners to help prevent that from happening. So the $55,000 per year is continuing, although it is continually on the chopping block each year. The slide says that only a third of the members of the IAFE, which is our National Association for Fairs, were eligible for some sort of federal aid. And again, depending on how they're organized, that was tough. The next slide talks about how fairs have had to get creative with dealing with that. I think fortunately, 2021, 2022 fairs who were able to kind of bounce back saw very good attendance, in some cases breaking record attendance and revenue. So I think folks were itching to get back out in the community and experience each other and fairs and all the fun that comes with that. So it's given, I think, fairs and counties and fairgrounds an opportunity to get creative with how things are operated. We've seen a lot of fairgrounds become hubs for additional resources in the community. And so when we make our pitch to the legislature, we say that the last 2 years have shown what fairgrounds can do. And that's why continued state funding is important. In the wildfires, fairgrounds were used as shelter, emergency shelter for animals and people, and RVs and, storage facilities, COVID testing centers, vaccination centers. I think the state fairgrounds still has a vaccination center on site, or at least did up until a couple months ago. So fairgrounds have become more than just a local event center. They've been reliant on emergency and other non-economic uses. The unfortunate piece about that is a lot of this happened, particularly at the state fairgrounds, without much assistance from the state or other entities. So fairgrounds are now looking to kind of recoup some of those dollars for both operating and capital expenses. The effect on entertainers and performers was also very, very tough. We saw some companies and some entertainers give up. And now with the staffing and supply issues that we all have, we're seeing some companies not make it through that either. So I'll take the carnival industry for an example. Maybe a few years ago, there were probably 5 or 6, I think, carnival companies that were operating in Oregon at various fairs. That's now dwindled down to maybe 3, and I think one is potentially going to stop. So that makes it tough, obviously, spreading resources throughout all the various fairs. And we know things like a carnival and the food and things like that are some of the big drivers of revenue for counties. So counties may see a dip in some of that. Future of county fairs. I think there's a lot that we can look forward to. Obviously, things like flus and other pandemics are going to cause issues that I think we're probably more prepared for. One good thing about the last 2 legislative sessions is with all the federal funds that have come through and the increased revenue, which I don't know if we'll see for too much longer, but the legislature was able to fully fund our $55,000 per year ask. We made some good headway in opening up a conversation to expand and increase that amount. Next session, we will have a bill that will increase the funding. So currently, county fair funding is capped at 1% of lottery funds, but there's a top line to that makes it $1.8 million per year for all fairs. So that's how you get the 55,000. That's not 1% of lottery funds. That's in statute. So if we were to get the full 1% without the cap, that would be approximately $8 million per year. So fairs would see a sizable, counties would see a sizable increase in operating funds that come. The last 2 legislative sessions, we were fortunate enough to get Fairgrounds received almost $50 million in capital funding. About 40 million of that was for specific projects in counties, and depending on legislators and political connectivity was how that was distributed. So it wasn't exactly equitable. So one thing our association is working for is kind of continued equitable funding for county capital needs, like things like your master plan that you're working on. And one piece of funding that came out that was equitable and is hopefully a good opportunity for us to expand on is $10 million that came from the legislature that will fund capital projects for counties. It's going through Business Oregon. In fact, I see Emily Cook from Business Oregon online. And Business Oregon has been a great partner to the counties and the fairs in implementing this program. All 36 counties were eligible and applied for funding. So each county is receiving approximately $277,000 to fund capital needs. So our goal in the next session is to continue and expand that funding. We will be getting all of the fairs together later this year, probably November, December, to similar process to what the community colleges do. And that is to basically get everybody in the same room. Let's identify all of our projects and figure out how we're going to score and rank these projects, and then go into the legislature with a list of projects that we're supporting in order. And that way we don't have counties or fairs, approaching separate legislators saying, hey, fund this, fund this. They'll be able to work off a comprehensive list that's endorsed by the association and hopefully partner associations like AOC and other groups. So those are kind of our future plans legislatively that we hope to engage with you all on as we continue. We also plan, the third piece of that is more funding and more capital funding for the state fair too. We all 36 counties rely on the state fair to be healthy and effective in what they do. Again, not just for the fair, but for all the other uses that the fairgrounds are used for, such as AOC using it for its legislative days each month. So we hope to, hopefully we'll be circling back to you all as commissioners and AOC to gain your support on some of those items, which I hope will then in turn contribute to some of your master planning process. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Patrick?
Yeah, you, by the way, thank you for being here, Patrick, and it's good to see you again. You kind of mentioned this a little bit in your presentation, but what are some of the other things that fairgrounds do year round to generate revenue besides having a fair? What are some of like the bread and butter of like revenue generation for fairgrounds facilities in Oregon besides the fair?
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Jacobson. I think we see a wide range depending on the capacity and facilities, but youth education events, cultural festivals, trade shows and expositions. I mean, you see everything from, gosh, I saw a sign the other day that Washington County Fairgrounds was doing a reptile show, just exclusively a reptile show. Of course, we see some counties that use their county fairgrounds for things like gun shows or RV shows. So you get a lot of some of those private industries and groups coming in, equestrian events for some. There are a handful of fairgrounds that have horse racing facilities that are used for revenue, craft and hobby shows, other consumer shows, nonprofit fundraisers, and other government events. I mean, that's probably a bulk of what all they do, but I'm sure I'm missing some concerts, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hunt, any questions for Patrick?
Yes, Patrick, it's good to see you again, even if it's been virtually. I remember when we first met, I think you were working for, at the time, Representative Cowan. So it's good to see you again.
You too.
I was taking notes about some of the dollars and just maybe clarify, you said that 1% of the lottery dollars is available for distribution to the counties. And you said, I believe $50 million is available in capital funds for the counties. And if so, is that capital funds general fund money from the state, or is there another source?
Thanks, Commissioner.
And are my figures correct? Feel free to correct me.
Yeah. The 1% of lottery funds is current. However, that 1% is not a true 1% because the statute has a cap on that funding of about $1.8 million. So for the last, I don't know how many years before I've even been involved, counties have received that flat amount of funding, $1.8 million per year, divided among the 36 fairs. Our bill hopes to make it a true 1%, which would, quadruple fair funding for folks. So that's the one piece we're working on. The capital funding, over the last two sessions, the legislature has funded about $50 million, including that $10 million that was distributed equally among all the fairgrounds. Going forward, we are going to have to advocate to keep that going. So zero of that $50 million is guaranteed funding moving forward at this point. And it was a combination of general fund, which was passed through from the federal government, and also some lottery funding as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your good work.
And I'll say thank you, and it's been great to see you as well, Patrick.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. I have a follow-up question.
okay.
I am sorry. Looking ahead on our agenda, Patrick, I'd be interested in your thoughts in looking at the county fairs throughout the state. Is there a pattern? Is there a priority on the way they are operated, i.e. do the counties operate them, nonprofits, volunteers, public partnerships? What is there a pattern that you see in your role?
Commissioner Hunt, I think the majority of the counties, and I don't have the exact figures, but the majority of counties, probably, 28 or more, are run as county departments with the fair manager that is employed by the county, or some version of that. But we are starting to see, especially through COVID. I'll take Baker County for example. They decided to take away their fare and contract it to OSU Extension. I think they actually built it off of the program you have. We also saw Benton County move their fare into their Parks Department and then made their fare manager their Parks Department head. I think there's another county that's considering the same, of consolidating their fare and Parks Department. So fares are either their own department or kind of a subset of another county department. And then there's a small handful that are either nonprofits or, there's a couple that don't even know what their organizational structure are. So we're working on some of that as well. But it does vary per county, but most are county departments that answer to the Fair Board and the Board of Commissioners.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate your candor.
Thanks again, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
I think you'll be introducing our next pair of presenters.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next group is, presenters are the Oakview Group. The Oakview Group is joining us remotely today. We're joined by Peter Zingoni and Brian Hoffman. Now, I know Brian is from Seattle. And Peter, where are you located today?
Well, as of a few hours ago, I am now back home in Philadelphia.
Well, thank
I
you.
woke up in Chicago and in Philadelphia today, right now.
Well, thank you for joining us at this later hour. The reason for the Oakview Group is familiar with this organization on two different actions. One, having been engaged in the capital improvement and subsequent development of a performing arts and event center in the Seattle area that the city opted to pursue working with the private operator for its management. And then in the attraction of the National Hockey League team and corresponding franchise ownership of the Seattle Kraken. And as a member of the Seattle Sports Commission, intimately involved with them on that. Why are they here today? They're one of the largest, if not the largest, fairground management companies, and they'll explain that to you. But I thought it was important that we get somebody of this magnitude and ilk to come in and try to provide you with some insight on items to consider as it pertains to operations of a fairground, not a fair, but a fairground. With that, Peter and Brian, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Excellent. Tim, commissioners, thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. I think it's a perfect segue listening to Patrick speak on the state of the actual fairs themselves, where we like to say we are on the operational side of fairgrounds all around the country. In fact, as I go through our little presentation deck, you'll see today we're a part of 20 fairgrounds across the country between our three bona fide divisions that we have at Oakview Group. Diving into the presentation we have here, just a quick little background snapshot of who we are. We were created by two legendary figures in the sport and entertainment world, one being Irving Azoff, which is the most powerful individual in the entertainment, music, and concert business. He represented about 85% of the artists that are touring today. He was the former chairman of Live Nation and Ticketmaster. So a real big name, created the likes of the Eagles and Bon Jovi and the band Chicago. So very well respected gentleman on that side. And the second gentleman was Tim Lewicki, who is the former chairman of AEG, which created the LA Staples Center and the Los Angeles Lakers, the Kings, and a number of other professional sport franchises as well. We are officially headquartered out of Los Angeles, but I have offices in Philadelphia, New York, London. We have a very strong international presence as well. We have about 10,000 full-time employees. And our theme with our organization is being a positive disruption in the industry today. And coming out of COVID, as Patrick touched upon quite a bit, there was a big consolidation. Our business virtually shut down, went down from zero. We are currently, if we go to the next slide and share a little bit about what we do and some of the divisions that we have 3 bona fide divisions. So we have a venue management division where we operate everything from arenas to convention centers to stadiums to fairgrounds, performing arts centers, you name it. We also have a food and beverage division. So we compete with the Sodexos, the Aramarks, the Centerplates of the worlds as well. And then lastly, we have a sponsorship division. So we specialize in naming rights, luxury suite sales on the arena side. But believe it or not, we have a super strong presence in the fair world, representing fairs across the country, selling sponsorship on their behalf. So think of us as an outsourced option for various owners like yourselves of fairgrounds or assets or properties where we manage and operate on their behalf. We work in the best interest. So I would say 90% of our clients are municipalities, counties, and some sort of government agency, and we work on their behalf and try to maximize the revenue potential, trying to minimize costs, while trying to provide second to none customer experience and just bringing best practices because we are in the business. The scalability and the efficiencies are very natural for us. We have a very, very big division that we've just launched about a month ago in sustainability, as Tim referenced, of our presence of Climate Pledge Arena, which is the world's first carbon neutral arena, which is really cool, real fascinating. There are not one gas line in that whole building. In fact, we preserved the roof, and we now built a system on the roof that captures all the rainwater that flushes the toilets, pours the sinks, and actually makes the ice, which is really cool. And we try to highlight that. It's a pillar of our organization and the sustainability initiatives. So we're getting some real good presence that. All in all, across the 3 divisions that I just referenced, we have about 420 clients and 20 in the fairground worlds. As big as the State Fair of Texas and the Dallas Fair Park, and as little up as Bangor, Maine, to Tennessee, to some of our notable properties throughout California. We are in Yakima, Washington, at the Central Washington State Fairgrounds as well. So it's a really, again, going back to some of the comments that were made by Mr. Singh of how to maximize. One of the questions that came out from one of the commissioners was how do we maximize fairgrounds when the fair is not going on? And that's where we step up, and that's what we do. So concerts, activity, family shows. We try to, our philosophy is driving content will always drive people, which brings ancillary revenue such as food and beverage, such as sponsorship sales, and trying to capture those audiences and really trying to maximize the counties or cities or state assets, or even on behalf of the nonprofits. We work very, very closely with the fairs themselves in trying to, again, maximize the synergy. So we work on marketing initiatives. We try to help them build database, really try to bring best practices to the table, and try to collect database so we can retarget new unique users that aren't traditionally accustomed to the ag world or the 4-H world. And we just try to educate them. We try to be a partner with them and try to bring as many folks in exposure to the fairs to grow their business as well, and continue to keep those fairs sustainable for many, many years to come. Moving along to the next slide here, if we stay on this slide for one sec, you can kind of see our presence of what we do. Now, the trend that we're seeing as operators of fairgrounds is we've seen a lot of different uses over COVID. We were, ground zero for testing sites during the COVID. We were shelters. Obviously there was a lot of various reasons, whether it was fire, whether it was makeshift hospitals. So fairgrounds themselves are there more of the economic impact, but they're there for the community asset. There's a thing we like to say is we try to increase the quality of life in these communities by offering the fairgrounds as an opportunity for everyone to be a part of, whether it's through various events, educational lessons. So we try to implement those and work with partners on the event side and educational side to make sure that we're providing that. But what we're now also seeing as fairgrounds is mostly in the urban markets is what do we do to help maximize the potential of the buildings that are on the site? So we're seeing a big trend right now of amphitheaters being developed, in trying to drive more music or concerts activity that help supplement some of the fair practices that are also going. If you go to some of the more notable fairs, there's always some sort of music component. Well, we're trying to invest, our company invests our money into these operations to help, again, attract more and more folks to the fairs and create a better experience. And it helps increase revenue potential because of our booking capabilities and the relationships that we have in the music industry. We could very easily route these venues. So you think about it, for the self-managed and self-run counties, they have to compete with other groups like ourselves when we have 20, as you can see. And what we do is we'll work to route those particular artists through these fairgrounds during their particular state or county fair. So that's a little bit of the advantage that we get to bring to the table. We bring some capital to the table and invest in revenue producing assets across the fairgrounds, again, trying to make sure that there's something there for everyone and trying to maximize and minimize, I should say, some of that taxpayer deficit that usually occurs in a lot of these fairgrounds. Moving along to the next slide. Here's kind of our approach. As I mentioned, it's a very holistic approach. As you can see, we say content drives everything. So what we try to do is we provide all the event management. We're a turnkey solution for counties that are interested in outsourcing operations. So what we do is we do all the day-to-day management. Mostly we will do this type of activity outside of the days of those fairs, generally speaking, a week or two. But we do handle all the day-to-day operations. We handle all the ticket sales. We will provide the food and beverage services. We have the State Fair of Texas opening up this weekend with the big Red River Showdown, Texas, University of Texas and OU game, and we provide all the food and beverage services to the Cotton Bowl where that game is played, but then also everything on the outskirts. So we work with local business owners in trying to promote their business at the fairs, whether it's through kiosks or pop-up food and beverage opportunities. We try to maximize that. We also, as I mentioned earlier, really try to maximize the potential of sponsorship and partnership opportunities. So we focus for those unique users, specifically in the ag space, the John Deeres of the world, and some of the larger ag 4-H friendly kind of organizations and corporations that want to grow their presence in state fairs and county fairs. So we try to work with them, and that revenue flow goes back to the fairs themselves, or in some cases, if it's outside of the fair, we work on behalf of driving that revenue stream to help offset that taxpayer subsidy in the bottom line of the operation, including parking revenue as well. So we get real creative. We understand the sensitivity of every single market, that once you start charging for parking, people get upset. But our approach is to try to implement that, try to work with that, and work with not only the patrons, the county, but also trying to find that fine balance of the commercial versus the the commercial side of the business versus the community benefit and what it is. So it's just revenue growth is really what we look at and trying to grow on behalf of our clients. Moving along to the next slide. Again, I mentioned a few of the potential revenue streams that we would focus, and this all starts with content, right? So the more activity drives more people, drives more visibility and eyeballs, we like to say, in the business to those signage, which increases the value of that sponsorship or that corporate partner trying to advance. So naming rights is huge. We've actually sold $3 billion worth of naming rights in the last 18 months. That has the Climate Pledge Arena, which was a naming right partner through Amazon, UBS Arena in New York City that we just built, all the way down to University of Texas, Austin, and the Moody Center. So you have various items of naming right partners. We are actually in the process of soliciting a few different naming right partners as we speak on behalf of our fairground site. So you're seeing a new trend across the country right now of maximizing some of the potentials of the assets on the fairgrounds, whether it's a 4-H building, whether it's a conference center, whether it's some sort of event activity such as an amphitheater of some sort. We will look to sell those naming rights because of the focus of the people and the concentration of those eyeballs. There's value to that, so we try to take a look at that. And then, one of the things that the item from an operational perspective is outsourcing to a professional management company like ourselves is not a one-stop fits all or a one-shop fits all. It's really understanding the nuances of the county, of the fair, and what's important to the people. So, for us, and just in kind of educating you of kind of what we work for, is generally we get paid a base management fee. And then we try to align ourselves with different incentive fees to make sure our performance is also being evaluated and rewarded if done right. So we build incentive benchmarks that are mutually agreed upon that kind of align ourselves with the county, the folks in the community, the customers, the hospitality community, whether it's in the hotels, the restaurants, the bars, all the way to the gas stations, quite honestly, the CVBs, the Convention and Visitor Bureaus. So we really try to take a very holistic approach of how we interact ourselves within a community. So one of those things that we'll do on your behalf as well is kind of identifying and putting best practices, as I referenced a few times now, and understanding the policies and procedures. So one of those things, as we go through the contracting process, is we will make sure that always the fairs are protected during those set dates every year. Whether it's set dates every year or every year we agree to identify new dates. So they'll have the first priority of booking, and then other users, other nonprofit users at the fairgrounds to understand those priorities. But understanding truly that what we do is trying to increase revenue and, again, minimize that taxpayer loss. So we want to make sure that there's something there for everyone, with the understanding that it's going to be a very fine balance of community business with the commercial side of the business. Moving forward to the last slide, I guess that was it. So I threw a lot at you. I am happy to answer any questions, and some of the presents we have Brian Hoffman on the line as well, who's a general manager for us in Federal Way, Washington, or one of our performing arts center, but also brings a tremendous amount of experience working in the fair world, working in the concert booking industry. So between Brian and I, we have a really strong background of kind of what we do, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for a great presentation. And one question I'd like to pose, this is a great vision of operationally what a working relationship with your firm could be. But I think, as you've been made aware, we are just at ground zero on starting a $25 to $30 million redevelopment project of the facilities at the Commons. And does your firm have experience? Is this a part of your book of business of kind of supervising, managing a redevelopment process?
This is exactly what we do, and that's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner, for asking. So one piece of our business that we take a lot of pride in is what we call our pre-opening services, or pre-opening development consulting division. So we have subject matter experts within our organization that will come in and look with you. We're not architects, we're not contractors, we're operators. So what we do, we take a look at the plans, we take a look at the renderings of what the development looks like, and then we put our operator hat on and say, okay, what's the lift going to be of event activity for us to make sure that the pro forma that we've built and that we're going to the bank to finance all these cool upgrades and improvements can actually handle what we're saying on paper, i.e., for example, we're saying that we're going to generate $1 million. I'm making numbers up, but $1 million of food and beverage revenue. Well, we take a look at the plans and we say, whoops, our kitchen is not big enough to support $1 million of food sales. So we'll go back to the drawing board and work hand in hand from an operational perspective, consulting, making sure that aligns specifically with the pro forma. That goes same for the types of events that we're going to bring, whether it's gun shows, whether it's quinceañeras, whether it's a ride and drive show, which is very common on a lot of our fairgrounds. We did in Dallas and a number of locations, we did something called the Enchanted Christmas, which is a light up festival that you drive through, and just trying to maximize, which traditionally would be a very much of a dead season for us. We made a winter wonderland for during the holiday season for folks to drive through, play nice music, and people you pay by the car, you pay by the person. So trying to maximize those ways, all of which what I'm saying is we need to take a look at those plans to make sure all those great and diverse types of events can actually fit into the building. So to answer your question, yes, we get very involved. As we speak in November in Dallas, I have a big bond referendum for $475 million from a renovation project. I would encourage you all to check out Dallas Fair Park, and I'm happy to send some follow-up information to Tim to share with the group. But we're going about a $475 million renovation of the Fair Park to upgrade all the facilities to do exactly what we're talking, because we want to maximize not only the State Fair of Texas's business and what they're trying to accomplish with their educational programs, but also from us outside of those 27 days a year that they hold, that they control the building. How are we going to also maximize on behalf of the city of Dallas that owns the 298-acre fairground? So to answer your question, that's what we do. We'd love to get involved and certainly bring our subject matter experts to do that.
Questions, Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, I do have a question. You had said that, you are of many things, a food and beverage services company. And when you were talking about, I think it was on slide 9, you were kind of talking about that you handle all the food and beverages at those fairgrounds facility, but then you also work with local vendors. So I guess I was confused. Do you have rights to all food and beverage sales?
Yeah.
At
So
those places you manage?
Yeah.
And how do local vendors work into that?
Sure. No, it's another great question. So what we do is, because of, and in a lot of these cases, there's an alcohol component to that. So, with the different liability risks that go along with, holding an alcohol license or a liquor license, they want one vendor to do it. So we take kind of the master concessionaire license, and what we will do is we subcontract to local businesses. Excuse me. We'll subcontracting based on feedback from you, from the community, and trying to spread out different uses. There's the sense of familiarity with the local businesses. Everybody wants to support local businesses. And what we bring to the table is help support them with our purchasing power on food and beverage specifically, and the cost of sales, which has risen to uncharted territories these days, unfortunately. Our purchasing power can help those local small business owners be more efficient on their profitability and their margins. So we work hand in hand with those local vendors to make sure we're maximizing their profitability so they can stay in business, and try to support them as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's very comprehensive. If the county were to enter into a partnership with your organization, would you envision there being full-time staff here in the county? And I guess it depends on the degree or the scope of the contract, but how many people might that be?
Now, another excellent question. So the way our contracts are set up is simply through, it's a management contract. So what we do is we develop a budget. You still fund the budget as the county. We operate under that budget, right? So we will put full-time staff. Generally, the size of the venue will determine, the building plan, the building program will determine the amount of staff. But generally speaking, we will have a general manager on site. So we'll have somebody that kind of owns that operation on our behalf, but also on your behalf. He or she will be your point of contact and through the operation. We'll also have a head of marketing. We'll probably look to have a head of finance because we'll be handling all the finances on your behalf as well. So the event settlements with the fair, when we host all those ancillary events, they'll be handling those as well. And budgeting purposes. One of the things that I refrained from saying is we will also work with you through the operation to develop all of your CapEx, all of your capital planning projects from 1, 3, 5 and years beyond. So we'll actually be your agent to help develop those. So it's very important to have an operations member on the team and a finance director. So in a scope and scale of the fairgrounds that you have, I would say conservatively, you're probably looking at 3 to 5 full-time employees to be conservative. And as the events start to layer in more prominently and we start picking up business, then we will start. And now those full-time staff, by the way, will also be supplemented by part-time staff on the event side as well. So your ushers, your ticket takers, parking attendants, for instance. So we'll handle that. But from a full-time basis, you're probably looking 3 to 5 conservatively. And then as the event load picks up over the course of that contract, we would probably add in. But you have one of the things I want to make it very, very, a very important point is you control everything. The biggest fear I hear when I speak to municipalities or counties that are considering outsourcing to a professional management company is the loss of control, which is the absolute last thing that happens. You, in fact, control everything from the hiring, who the person is. You get to decide the type, you get to approve the budget on an annualized basis. You get to approve all the marketing initiatives and the types of events that flow into the building. And we just try to utilize and maximize our efficiencies and relationships in the industry to actually drive and confirm host those events for you on your behalf.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Any other questions from the board? Again, thanks on behalf of all of us for an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to meet you all and hopefully in person soon.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next on our agenda, we are pleased to have both Todd Williver and Heather Tower. Heather is here joining us. Todd is someplace in Alaska right now. I'll let him explain, but they're going to talk a little bit about the relationship with the county and the 4-H program, and we'll get into talking a little bit later about the barn. So,
well, good morning. Good morning, all, and thank you. Yeah, I'm traveling last week and this week. I was in Kodiak, Alaska last week, and I'm in Juneau this week on behalf of the university, doing some trainings up here. So between Peter and everyone else, we've pretty much got this this continent covered through our meeting. And thank you again for. I guess my head is swimming a little bit on just with all the information that we've digested and how thorough and really thought-provoking all of this has been. Mr. Belmont and Mr. Johnson, kudos to putting together a really good presentation so far, and I hope what we have to offer is equally important. I guess I'll lead off. I know Heather has a great presentation with some pictures of the 4-H activities, but let me, by way of background, just say a couple of things. 4-H, as you've heard, and it keeps popping up from Patrick's presentation and Peter's presentation, and as you guys well know, 4-H is the single largest user probably of most fairgrounds, not just ours, but around our state and across the country, across the nation. And not only is it a large user during fair time, but it's also one of the year-round tenants that will utilize this facility. So I guess I think it's important to note that, because I'm sort of coming at this from several different angles. The first from sort of the selfish 4-H standpoint. The second from the fair management side. As you know, we've contracted with the county for, I think, 9 years, excluding 1 year when we did not do the fair because of COVID. So 8 years, 8 of the 9 last years to conduct the county fair. And it's been a good run for us. We've learned an awful lot. We've, I think, Heather and I have created, and Michelle, for those of you that have been around longer, have created a really quite remarkable county fair that I think is very appreciated by the people of Lincoln County, and holds true to a lot of those values that we heard Patrick talk about, and really create something that we can be quite proud of in our local county. So as I'm sort of chatting, I just want you to know that I'm sort of intertwining both the 4-H side of things and the importance of that relationship as the single largest user with the commissioners and with the fair board, and a hope that we continue that relationship, and at the same time talking a little bit about the fair management side. I guess one of the things that I really want to state up front is that although my background is in 4-H and then through the kind of the narrow scope of the county fair process, I've been a proponent of understanding the multiple use of this facility from the very beginning. Fairgrounds, a county commons, cannot stand on its own with only a 4-H program or with only a fair event that lasts a few weeks a year. So from the beginning of the talk about the county commons and creating a venue that would support more year-round use, I've embraced that and celebrated the fact that I think that's the way this conversation is going. I think people understand that now, and understand that the things that we're putting together or considering are much larger than just a fairgrounds with the limited scope that would come with a fairgrounds. I think maybe I'll just step aside and let Heather roll with her presentation. You can see a little bit of the 4-H side of things, and then probably through questions, some other comments will probably surface as well.
So again, thank you for letting us be here today. I'm Heather Tower. I'm the 4-H title. My title right now is Administrative Program Assistant, but Todd has moved on to the state office, and so there's a little bit of shift in our program right now. But I've been with 4-H for about 5 years, with extension for 7. And 4-H, you can go to the next slide if you like, Casey. Like Todd said, is the biggest user of our county commons right now. These are just some fun pictures. I tried to find some more like archive pictures, but I couldn't come up with any. But 4-H has used the fairground for many, many, many years. I know Sue Giles, who's probably our longest standing leader, utilized the fairgrounds for many years for her dog club. And that is where I had dog club. I was going to say, yes. And then we currently do have a after school program that runs 3 days a week during the school year. And then which my child is at right now. So mine is too. And then you can go to the next slide. These are just, this is good. These are just some pictures of this year's county fair. After COVID, we had a very successful year at fair for the 4-H program. In 2021, we had 3 children that showed at fair. And this year, I think we had like 25 kids between the several project areas. The most notable and the one that we use the most, obviously, at the fair is the animal barn. We do not have open class currently at our county fair. So when the animals come in, they are all 4-H animals. And the kids take over that barn every year. They make awesome educational displays. They're in there. Our fair is 3 days. They're in there for 5 to 6 days, setting up, tearing down. They often leave the barn cleaner than they left it after the event. And then during the year, they utilize it for the biggest few things in the last year We have this is from the Echo Mountain Fire Complex. Because the 4-H have access to the fairgrounds so often and use it so often, when the need came, the kids knew where the panels were. They called each other to action, came down, set the panels up, got the barn ready. I think some of them lived there for several days. And just because of you guys allowing the kids to use the fairgrounds so often, they just knew what to do. Like, they didn't have to be told. They knew where things were. They knew how to get resources. And so these are just some pictures from, and I think all of those are our 4-H kids. And then the next one, again, we utilize it annually. Right now, they use it for the Christmas tree sale, which is a huge draw for our county. I get calls starting in November. When are the trees going to be here? I get my tree there every year. We had a sheep shearing clinic this year where the kids brought their sheep in and learned how to shear them. We do a Dippity U event, which is a public event. People come and bring their sheep to get sheared annually. We've had archery camps there. We've had day camps during the summer. We utilize it throughout the 4-H year. We do clinics. We do fundraisers. Anytime you guys let us use the building or the grounds. And then, not pictured, but the Master Gardeners utilize the 4-H barn annually for their huge plant sale, which is a large fundraiser for them. And many people from the community expect that sale every year. So we've just been very blessed that you guys have allowed us to use the facility. And the barn, as you know, is probably the biggest use during fair. We utilize the 4-H building more year round. But like I said, the kids do their best every year to clean it up, make it beautiful. And then when they tear down, they do an awesome job of making sure they left it cleaner than they found it. I think Tim's gonna talk more about that, and Todd can too. I don't know as much about that. I know what needs to be done.
So
Let me
let's go
jump
to
back.
that slide and hear from the T-men.
Go ahead, Todd.
So, yeah, I think that was a great overview of probably the last decade of 4-H youth development and the involvement in the use of the fairgrounds, now the county commons. One thing that I think is worth illustrating or kind of reaffirming is the fact that you guys also allow us to do an after-school program 3 days a week during the school year, so 9 months of the year, that is hugely beneficial to the community as well. It's low cost for parents that are struggling to figure out what to do with their youth after school. We offer scholarships when needed to be sure that we don't turn any kids away. And that's just another example of the year-round use that 4-H Youth Development and OSU Extension uses in our partnership with the county fair. Heather's absolutely correct. We can't say enough how appreciative of the use of that we are and how hard we work to try to maintain that relationship. We value it tremendously, and we certainly couldn't do what we do without the support of both the commissioners and the fair board. The other comment that I let me back up real quick to the renovation of the barn. Yes, is the short answer. That barn has outlived its usefulness for decades probably, and yet we continue to keep making it work. But it is when I announced several months ago to the 4-H group that it looked like we were finally going to get some facility improvements, we had absolute back handsprings from people saying, "Oh my gosh, that would be amazing." Heather mentioned that we probably get a little bit more use out of the what we consider or what we call the 4-H building or the pick of the litter building, but it's actually in pretty good shape. There are always maintenance issues and things that we could do, but it's in significantly better shape than the livestock barn is. The livestock barn is certainly the next building as far as usage goes, and certainly one of them that's worth salvaging, is structurally still in fairly good shape, but in desperate need of a facelift. So it seems appropriate to me from where I'm standing, not only in the 4-H program, but then the utilization that gets during the county fair, the other uses that it could be used for throughout the year. I truly support and applaud the effort to get this process started through the renovation of the livestock barn. I think that's a great first step in this plan. I think the other thing, the only other thing, and unless you have questions of me, that I wanted to point out is that many, as we start talking about year-round use of a facility, many counties find themselves trying to adapt a former fairgrounds to do events year round, whether they're RV shows or concerts, all of those things that Patrick mentioned and the Oakview Group fellows mentioned, and they struggle because their fairgrounds was really built sort of single purpose to accommodate a fair, and so they end up doing a concert in either in an outdoor venue or in a livestock barn, and we're really, as difficult as this process has been over literally decades to get where we are now. It's really fascinating to see all the parts coming together and know that our timing really couldn't be better to really be talking about what we're doing with the vision of the county commons and creating that facility that really supports that year-round use rather than just supporting a fair or building a fairgrounds. So I guess everything happens for a reason, and it's fun to see this come together as a community use facility that will support a myriad of uses throughout the year. I think that's really a great vision, and really the vision that I think most of us that worked on the visioning committee prior to that, the Blue Ribbon Committee, I think that's what a lot of people were hoping would come out of that, and it truly looks like that's what's going to happen. So with that, I'll just ask if there are questions of either Heather or myself that we can answer from either the fair management side or the 4-H side.
Commissioners?
No questions from me.
I'll make a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Todd and Heather, for your leadership. I think OSU Extension, the office involvement in the fair has helped make this fair successful, and I'll be candid, I think returned some vitality to the event. And I'll also give a shout out to 4-H for the Echo Mountain Fire animal evacuation. I actually drove to the fairgrounds or the common grounds and was there that night and saw some of those activities. So really was a critical service to provided to those that had animals that needed to be moved to avoid the fire. So thank you both for your good work.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, before we move on to next steps, anything more you'd want to say about the grant we've secured for the 4-H barn renovation?
My compliments to all of the three of you for the speed in which you moved through it. It was kind of humorous. Let's go back through the anatomy of this real quick. We received a phone call from Becky Baxter on a Friday from Business Oregon, and she was so polite, but she said, we have a very quick turnaround on this, and she informed us of money that was coming from the state, as Patrick identified. I remember talking to Commissioner Jacobson on that on Friday, and we were brainstorming. I remember talking to all of you, and it was on Wednesday where I think we settled on, I believe it was Wednesday afternoon that we settled on, let's go after the 4-H barn and get that going. And we initiated that at staff level to finish that up, turned it around, got it to Becky and Emily on the due date within that week of Friday. You had it on the BOC meeting and approved the grant application. Then we kind of went into holding pattern, turned around and got notice from Business Oregon that you had received it. You approved that. County staff at Public Works and Facilities immediately started the process for the bids. I might tell you that the bids came in, were well within the grant numbers. Kristen and the county council and her staff are working on a contract that will be coming to you in short order for your approval of that bid. And so it appears probably sometime in November, we will begin the process of putting a new roof, gutters, downspouts, siding, and finishing off a complete concrete floor in the barn. That will be a tremendous undertaking, but I think that then extends the longevity of that building and kicks this whole process off moving forward.
Yeah, and also I just want to add a big thank you to Jack Whaley, our maintenance and facilities person, because it was a phone call that I made in your office, Tim, to Jack on that Friday when we got the call asking him, how would you spend, $200,000 roughly at the fairgrounds if that's all you had? And he was the one that actually came up with this idea. So big thanks to Jack for knowing what we needed and how to spend this money.
Okay, I guess we're ready to transition into discussion of next steps.
Again, thank you, Todd and Heather, very much for your time today. It's much appreciated. Under next steps, there's a couple things here. Obviously, it is for me looking at the reality of the cost associated with the plan and understanding what those are. And I think that we've had some very good work done within the context of that. We'll have to measure that a little bit against the inflationary increases that you're all facing relative to construction, but we'll adjust accordingly to that. So what are those estimated costs and what does it buy us? And how do we align those revenues for debt services? So one of the things that I think is sound direction is working with the team here at the county, similar to what we've done with the animal shelter and moving forward on that. We bring together a multidisciplinary team. The input is phenomenal. Quality of the work is top flight. And in this regard, looking at the revenue stream, we will need to hire a retain from the outside, what we call either a bond or financial advisor. And that would be somebody who will actually sit down with us and go through these numbers, look at and prepare a full forecast and give us an analysis of what we could expect or a time horizon of revenues to pay the debt service for the construction to fulfill the master plan that you have approved. Within the context of that, we would like to have the opportunity to get your permission to develop a corresponding work plan for that to begin 2023 and through 2025, so that you know exactly what the steps will be moving forward. And if you give us the permission, we'll start that now and then bring the full work plan to you at the beginning of the year, so you know exactly what that is. So that would entail a financial analysis. If it also includes looking at how to proceed financially, if that is a revenue bond placement, so be it. If it is something else that they recommend, and that is important to know. Also issues associated with project and risk management, meaning project management, risk management for this effort. We need to consider that and what those elements are on through construction and all the elements necessary for planning and infrastructure. Geotech analysis. We understand that there may be issues out there on the soils and we need to look at those. What our infrastructure issues are out there. And correspondingly, you heard a little bit today, and I'll just say just a little bit, but you've got a pretty good 32,000 foot view of what operations might be and then subsequent implementation and a timetable for that activity. At some point, should you decide after if you decide to retain a financial advisor, there will be requirements for probably a bond counsel and a bond underwriter, but those steps come later in the process. But it's important for you to know that those are things that you might need to have. Those costs would be incurred through the placement of the bond, and you're paid through that way. So you're not having to go out and find, oh, great, now how do we pay for this? It's all incorporated into what you have directed and what the voters have passed. It's a lot of work, but you know what? 30 years since you've taken on a capital improvement project of this size. But I feel very confident with the team of professionals that you have on staff, watching what they're doing in other work, that you have all of the pieces of the puzzle that you need at your fingertips to make this happen. And I know that you would like to move this project along. So I hope today's workshop has provided you with that insight. With that, if I can answer any questions, I stand ready to do so.
Commissioners?
I don't think I have any questions. I think it's been a very well organized workshop. I think the information that's been provided has been very valuable, and appreciate the good work.
I have a ton of questions, but I'll let you go first if you want to.
I know I don't really have any at this point.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
I guess I have several questions. They don't necessarily all connect together, but one is, this might be a Council Belmont question. Is the writing arena in the master plan? I cannot remember. Heather knows. Thank you, Heather. Okay. The other question I had for Tim is, do you know within ARPA funding if it's possible to use any of that funding on this project? And specifically the fact that, you know, the fairgrounds serves a secondary use, which is evacuation and sheltering facilities, no doubt, absolutely. You know, could we use some of our remaining ARP funds or go after ARP funds that the state has to, you know, add on, I don't want to say add on to the existing building, but as we build our new building to make that more seismically safe or have better filters in it or whatever that you might need for some evacuation. Additionally, my question goes kind of the same thing back to the writing arena. That is the only place we have in Lincoln County to evacuate livestock. I mean, that is it. So, you know, is there a possibility of using ARPA funding now to try to make that building safer, better, maybe do similar improvements on that as we're doing to the 4-H livestock barn now? I don't know if you could do anything to make that more seismically safe or not. It seems like maybe you couldn't, but you know, can you use ARPA funds for evacuation facilities, I guess is the question.
Correct answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Let me follow up with something that you all had a conversation on and you were instrumental in providing. So let's go back to the U.S. Forest Service SRS dollars that the three of you just voted on in the titles 1, 2, and 3 that you approved. Title 3 in particular was the new one that has not been so rigid and was opened up and reforms occurred on it. So there was a conversation in Mr. Belmont, if he's still here.
Yes, he is.
We had this conversation with state officials on this, as well as federal officials, and one of the things that was learned was under the Title III, there was an opportunity to have study done or analysis done on how to, I guess, relocate livestock that may be in harm's way, and the ability to be able to develop that, also as well as equipment necessary to move livestock out of harm's way. Well, then you're looking at that. Now you're coming together with a comprehensive package where you're not only removing the animals from harm's way, but then you're also taking them someplace where they can be sheltered. And so here you have this facility that you're talking about. So you've got a couple different opportunities that seem to come to the forefront, Commissioner, and that is to the efforts that you've done on grant writing. This continues on, and we just happened to look under IIJA and the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, and bingo, there it sits, the opportunity to be able to find grant money to enhance something like this in concert with ARPA. So ARPA you can use for the infrastructure on said facility, for the use of emergency facility. IIJA you can acquire continued grant dollars. And we're just looking under the one that you were just informed just today about the local government and intertribal fund program that came out of ARPA, that apparently if we are an SRS mandated county,
Which we are.
yes we are, that how you can move that also into something like this.
And actually, on a side note, as I was scooping food into my face, getting ready to this meeting, I got a call from Wyden's office. That portal open, and Lincoln County will be getting 1.2 million out of that.
Oh, excellent.
So there is some money sitting there as well. Okay, on to my other questions. Thank you. One thing I guess I just want to, this is kind of getting down to the details, and we don't have to get into this today, but in the master plan, there's a large portion of that fairgrounds facility that is simply just green space. That is what the plan shows in the picture. That is what it talks about. There's been, in fact, previously we had someone here from a youth sports group. There's been several people reaching out to me from youth sports with the need to have space for youth sports, especially just practicing. Not necessarily a huge, big, beautiful field like at the high school, but just a place for 3-year-olds to have soccer practice or t-ball or something of that nature. That's really becoming a difficult thing in Lincoln County and in Newport these days, is space for that. So I guess I would really like to have a conversation about what we want from that green space, because green space can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We already have a community garden in there, which is an OSU extension and a Lala Center project, and it's specifically a garden for the Latinx community, and is going very well and has some important programming. Again, so that's a use of green space that I think is an important conversation to have about how does that maybe fit in with green space in the future. And I guess the bigger thing I wanted to say is not so much a question, but, I really, one of our presenters said today that, their goal is really increasing the quality of life for the community and use of the fairgrounds to do that. And to me, I think that's really important. That's what's first and foremost. While I think revenue generation needs to be thought of and needs to be happening in our facility. And I actually think we have a lot of opportunity that we just don't take advantage of right now because we don't have a fairgrounds manager and all of that kind of stuff. And to me, it's quality of life. I think that is the biggest thing, and how that facility can be of use to people and activities that are already taking place in this community. I really appreciate hearing from the Oak View group and what kind of external fairgrounds management might look like. I mean, I think that was really helpful in understanding what they do and how that looks like. For me, that's not something I'm personally interested in. I feel like, that's something I'm totally that person he talked about, not wanting to give up control. I am that, and I will own it. I don't want to give up control. And I especially, want a group, if we did go to an external group that really understood our local community and understood rural communities. I think that we could achieve not everything that the Oakview group presented, but a lot of things simply by having a dedicated fairgrounds manager like Benton County does, that looks at revenue sources and opportunities. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is a workshop meeting and we do not make formal business decisions at the meeting, but would my fellow commissioners be comfortable with informally letting Mr. Johnson know we are in favor of asking him to, as he's requested permission to formulate a commons work plan for the years 2023 to 2025, and then bring that back to us for a presentation and I assume action during one of our regular meetings.
Todd raised his hand.
Oh, okay.
Todd, give me 1 second. I'm working on getting you.
Thanks for
There
just
he
a
is.
moment. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I keep raising my hand and lowering my hand. Commissioner Jacobson has brought up a couple of good points that I think are just worth a very quick comment. She mentioned that one of the reasons we don't have revenue generation is that we don't have management. And that's absolutely true. Another key portion of that or reason for that is the current condition of the fairgrounds, which we're actively addressing. One other thing I just want to bring up is that as a user of the fairgrounds and a year-round user of the fairgrounds, a huge consideration in Lincoln County is the weather. And I've been a proponent of saying if we can't find a way to cover it so that it can be used year round, it's probably not worth building. And I know that's sort of a grandiose statement and not completely possible, but I think it's important as we start looking at a year-round facility and how to best utilize that we've had all sorts of discussions about the arena and covering portions or all of it, the outdoor arena, about the pavered space or the outdoor spaces that are not green spaces, and how maybe to cover some of that. I just think and I get the fact that this really isn't a planning meeting to address those things, but I just like to voice that and say, if we're really looking towards year-round use and revenue generation, we got to get people out of the weather somehow. And a lot of those, I think, sort of dovetail with Commissioner Jacobson's comments. And I just wanted to kind of bring that up again. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Todd. So the question I put forward, are we okay with informally directing Mr. Johnson to develop the plan for 2023, 2025 and bring it back to us?
Fine with me.
May I just pose this question?
Yeah, certainly.
Would I have permission to bring it to a board of commissioners to approve that? Not today,
Okay,
not to ask today. but
bring it
come
as a
back to
decision
the
item
BOC.
to a future
And that'll-
meeting.
That addresses.
I'm more
my
comfortable
concern.
with that.
Fine.
Let's
That
go that
addresses
route.
my
You're
concern.
you're just informing them of the next steps that you're going to take.
If that's
Okay.
all right, if they don't
Yes.
want me to go that level, but I'll
I-
appeal before the BOC
Yes.
to make that request.
I agree for you to bring it back
Okay,
to us in
Yeah.
a regular meeting.
let's do that.
As do I.
And with that, I believe we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Let us know when we're off the air. Okay.
She'll do it for me.
Thank you, Heather.
Hey, if
Yeah.
any of you would like